In this final lecture for English 421Y, I will focus on the visual requirements for the incident analysis report, which include using page design consistent with formal long reports, and developing 2 original visuals to complement and enhance the material you found during the research process. While this is a writing class, as we've seen throughout the semester, how you present information is often just as persuasive and impactful as what you present. Design plays a pivotal role in organizing information and engaging the reader, as we've seen, but it also conveys many of the specific genre conventions readers have come to expect from certain kinds of documents. For instance, formal long reports have a large number of front and back matter, including a title page, table of contents, and a list of figures. While these organize content, they also are standards that signal you're reading a report. They are expected by the audience, and when one or more of them aren't there, they can create problems. While there are many different ways to format a long report, certain elements are rather consistent, and there are clear stylistic and branding choices made to distinguish a report and engage the reader. Before your group settles on a format, I strongly recommend you look at examples of white papers to see how design decisions impact the larger document. White papers are research reports commonly developed by businesses or the government about a specific topic. While their purpose is slightly different than an incident analysis report, the design of the document is similar to the kinds of reports that we were writing. And there are tons of examples out there. To find a sample report, go to Google and then type in white paper, PDF, and then the name of your topic. The results of this search will bring up a range of full PDFs on a variety of topics, each with their own take on a traditional research report format. Comparing multiple sample white papers will give you ideas for how to construct and design your own report. So for example, you could do white paper PDF mining, white paper PDF gold king mine for the topic that I've been doing. And this brings up some of the reports that I've seen while I've been doing my research. A good example that I found is an IBM report entitled The Future of Mining. Unlike many of the federal reports that I found when doing Google search for white paper PDF gold king mine, this IBM white paper isn't through the government, it's through, obviously, IBM. It has a very striking visual layout. So you can see they have, here at the top, immediately you get a sense of the style of the company. Looking at the first 3 pages, you can see a number of stylistic choices made that impact how the reader engages with the document. This includes the 2-column format, consistent accent colors of dark green, blue, and then later on a lighter green. The system of headings and subheadings, which uses 2 different font sizes but both in dark green. The unique use of pull quotes, both here and down here with references. Bullet points, kind of used throughout the document. Research questions that are presented in light green. And then just an excellent use of white space, small paragraphs, clearly visible headings, and consistent use of visuals. Combined, and then there's a running header at the top that includes the title, as well as the page number and a clear, crisp line. Combined, these design elements make the document stand out compared to a document that might use default settings. So for instance, the white paper search that I did, you can compare that to a more sort of simple default report. There's nothing necessarily wrong with this, but it's just not nearly as visually engaging. I want to push you to do something that's more consistent with the IBM report than with this other one. Further, these decisions catch the eye. They pull the reader's attention to points in the report that the authors clearly wanted readers to notice, regardless of their interest in the content. For the purpose of this project, I want you to develop a layout for your report that goes beyond the default Microsoft Word settings or template formatting and allows you to make rhetorical choices that impact how your audience perceives the content in your report. For instance, you might decide to add an accent color throughout the document, as the IBM report has done, which gives your report a consistent and engaging style. Or you might decide to use a 2-column layout, horizontal orientation, graphic headers and footers, pull quotes, hyperlinks. There's any number of choices. If you look at example white papers, you'll see what you like, you'll see what maybe is too much, you'll see what maybe isn't enough. There are so many decisions that you can make, and each impacts how the audience receives the content of your report in subtle but important ways. In addition to page design, each group must include visuals that complement, supplement, repeat, or clarify key information in the report. Like page design, visuals are strategically used in technical reports to clearly and persuasively expand or clarify details that are complex, subtle, easy to misinterpret, or important enough that they merit repetition. While you are encouraged to include visuals from other sources, as long as they are properly cited and attributed, at least 2 original visuals must be developed by your group specifically for your report. These original visuals must be different from one another. That is, you can't simply include 2 pie charts and call it a day. And they should be integrated into the body of your report rather than just floating on their own and never being directly referenced in the text. This requirement will be challenging, and rather than looking for shortcuts or choosing the easiest way to get it done fast, I want you to embrace that challenge and look for elements of your report that would be improved by being communicated through visuals. It helps to create visuals after you kind of have a good solid draft of your report. That way you can look at your report and decide and ask yourself, what information is missing? What information is unclear? Where would a visual break up the text? Where would a strong image or graph or chart or table or map or whatever really call attention to critical information and catch the reader's eye? When deciding on the type of visuals to include, I want you to think rhetorically. What visuals would best support your purpose, engage your audience, and refine your argument? Last semester, I had a group that submitted as their visuals an Excel pie chart and line graph. When I asked them why they chose these particular visuals, one student admitted they were boring, but he knew how to make them in Excel. My response was, if you think they are boring, your audience will also think they are boring and likely skip them. So what's the point of even including them? Obviously, I'm asking you to include them, but beyond that, you should have specific reasons why you use a certain kind of visual and not another. It's easy is not an answer to that question. So visuals are used in technical writing in part because they can more effectively communicate certain kinds of information than text, but also because they catch the eye, they break up large amounts of text, and they add a visual style or professional ethos to otherwise plain documents. Again, compare the 2 that I showed, one that has no visual design and no images, and one that has consistent use of great visual design and a lot of visuals. In the remainder of this lecture, I want to offer some ideas for visuals that have been successful in the past or that would be particularly effective for some of the topics selected by groups this semester. For each type of visual I describe, I include an example from the Gold King mine disaster sample topic that I've been using the last 2 lectures. The first type of visual I want to focus on are timelines. Some groups are looking at incidents where time plays a critical role in how information was documented, circulated, or received by the public. Timelines are a great way to visually represent chronological information and call attention to not only when things happened, but how they relate to other events happening at roughly the same time. The example I found is a timeline of the initial hours after the release of polluted water plotted on a map of the Animas Rivershed. So you can see they have 6 different times with brief descriptions that are plotted on this map of the river as it traveled south. This is consistent with the kind of timeline you might see in a newspaper article. I got this from the Denver Post. More complex timelines might have a lot more time points and might have more details and might be broken up by hour or day or year or whatever. But this is a pretty good example of a timeline that you might see that is not just the timeline, but also plotted onto another type of visual, in this case a map. The second kind of visual I want to point out is the comparison chart. Several groups are setting up direct comparisons between their incident and similar or related incidents. I'm thinking of the Fukushima group that's using Chernobyl to gauge the relative impacts and severity of the Japanese disaster. Comparison charts are tables that present information related to one or more subjects side by side so that differences and similarities become accentuated. While you might create a comparison chart for two different incidents, the subjects might also be more specific, such as comparing two different objects, contrasting different procedures and processes, or juxtaposing statistics about different materials or substances or whatever. While I couldn't find a comparison chart specifically for the Gold King mine disaster, I found one that compares pollution in major bodies of water around the world based on severity. So you can see you have two different types of comparisons going on. Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean Sea, these are different types of major waterways, and then this is different sources or types of pollution. And then down here is the key. This is a more visual one. You might see another good example of a comparison chart is if you're ever shopping for a laptop on Amazon, it allows you to compare, an Apple MacBook Pro to a Asus ZenBook or whatever, and it'll show you the different specs. That's another comparison chart. And they're very useful for showing a large amount of visual information and details, but also showing how they relate to other potential topics or subjects. The third type of visual that I want to briefly talk about is maps. For groups with location-specific incidents, maps are a great way to help readers unfamiliar with the location visualize the context for the incident. While the most convenient way to create a map might be something like Google Map Maker, I've also had groups sketch their own maps or add their own content to pre-existing blank maps. Maps are by far the most common visual that I've found when doing research for the Gold King mine disaster. The map that I've selected to show you shows the location of the mine in relation to sites downriver where water samples were collected and tested. You can see that this is a Google map with different points plotted. Here's the location of the original map, or the original mine, and then if you click on each one of these dots, it brings up testing, water sample testing information, additional links, and other data. This is a great map that is relatively simple to create. I've created maps that are similar to this. It takes a little bit of time to plot each one of these points, but for your specific incident, you might have maybe half a dozen to a dozen different points. I think they have closer to maybe 3 or 4 dozen points on here. Yours may not be as intensive as theirs. The fourth is flowcharts or process diagrams. Several groups have selected topics where the order and sequence of events is particularly important. Not just the chronological order, but the actual order in which something was done in relation to other events. This can be important either because what happened contrasts with what ought to have happened, or because there are conflicting reports about what actually occurred, and so a flowchart can be a nice way of showing this is the ideal of what should have happened, and this is what actually did happen. This is where maybe communication broke down, or information was misrepresented, or procedures were not carried out correctly. In these cases, a process diagram or flowchart can be useful for breaking down each step, showing the direct sequence of events, and illustrating relationships between events. So again, the flowchart that I selected is not related to the Gold King mine, but it does show the intricate processes for a new mine waste disposal policy. In this case, you can see the arrows point towards more specific information, and then you can see the order of information with labels and a key kind of showing what all of this means. Again, this is a great way of showing intricate, layered information, and then the relationships between different choices or different topic areas that might be happening at once. Finally, actually there's two more. The fifth is sketches, blueprints, and schematics. Given that this is a technical writing course, some of the information you want to communicate might be highly technical in nature, and thus difficult to describe in words. Sketches, blueprints, schematics, and diagrams are different methods of communicating information that is often invisible, complex, massive, or simply highly detailed. While you don't need to create a full set of schematics for an airplane engine or blueprints for a nuclear reactor, you might select a part or component of these larger systems to call out in more detail. The sketch that I've selected is a really simple sort of scientific diagram that shows the movement of rainwater into the mine, and then the production of heavy metals and other pollutions, and ultimately what happens when those are released into the river. You get dead fish and other negative consequences due to pollution. And then finally, sequential images are one of the most effective rhetorical moves to show changes of a topic over time, to show movement in a static image, or to document an object in its different states that you might not see them all at once. It can be very effective to show multiple images on the same page with numbers, labels, or captions that show how the different images relate. For example, with the Gold King mine, one of the most striking images is a before and after. The left image showing the Animas River before the release of pollution, and the right image showing the same location on the river after the release of pollutants from the Gold King mine. The two images create an incredibly striking contrast. That disgusting orange color was all over newspapers, and it creates a really striking contrast with, the crystal clear water on the left. The two images are simple, but it effectively shows just how much polluted water this was dealing with. A more technical image might go into more specific details of the contents of the water or something along those lines. You also might have a greater number of images, or it might show different points in the river or something like that. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but again, sequential images show change and movement in a way that a single static image cannot. Just showing you this orange river might be striking, but it's a lot more compelling when you contrast it with what the river normally looks like. Again, these are some ideas that you can use. There are many, many, many different ways, many different types of visuals that you can use. Which type of image you select will obviously depend on your topic and what you are trying to communicate. Again, you are required to use two different types of visuals. So I encourage them to be very different. Rather than doing two charts or two tables, or, again, a line graph and a pie chart, I recommend a map and a timeline, or a sequential image and a series of comparison tables. Something that conveys a variety of different levels of information and types of visuals. Again, you can use visuals other than the ones that you create, but you must cite them, and you must actually reference all visuals, attribute them, and include them in your text. For example, see figure 1, or in the timeline, you will notice that blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this is the end of the video lectures for the semester. For those who watch these lectures throughout the semester, thank you. Hopefully you found them useful. One thing that I ask those of you who did watch several or all of these, please include specific mentions of these lectures in your end of semester course evaluations, whether you loved them or hated them or simply didn't watch them because they were too long or whatever. I'd like to hear your thoughts on these visuals so that on these video lectures so that I can change or revise them for the future. For now, good luck finishing up on the incident analysis report.